don't miss another update.
Namaste and welcome to this episode of Jaipur Dialogues, and that is Blunderboy Nehru Part 2. And Part 1, we had discussed a few things, and the summum bonum of what we had discussed was that Nehru was actually a Soviet lover, and he was heavily under the influence of the communist ideology, and especially the communist ideology which was advocated by Comintern, and he used to do his twists and turns and U-turns and V-turns as dictated by the Comintern, and that was evidence for once when the Second World War started. After the start of the Second World War, he was against the British, and when the Soviet Union and British allied after Hitler attacked Soviet Union, he suddenly became pro-British. So British were very happy with him, and Soviet, of course, he was the blue-eyed boy of the Soviets. He was very much opposed to Subhash Chandra Bose. He was very scared of Subhash Chandra Bose' intellectual prowess and his dynamism, and that was always in evidence whenever he dealt with the situation regarding the partition and regarding the independence. Anyway, so before we go into Part 2, we have to keep that in mind. And before I start Part 2, let me request you to please like, share, subscribe, and also press the bell icon. And also, please keep your contributions rolling, because it is that which keeps us going. So, in Part 2, we come to the situation after the Mountbatten Pact. The Mountbatten Pact happened on 3rd July. It was announced in Parliament of Britain on 3rd July 1947, and the Indian Independence Act was passed and notified on 18th July 1947 by the British government. It was signed by the Queen on that day, 18th July. So that is the date on which the partition of India, or rather I would call it a transfer of power. It is called Indian Independence Act by the British, but basically it was transfer of power. And transfer of power was being done in accordance with the strength in the Central Assembly. They had already decided, there in the schedule to the Indian Independence Act, as to how India is going to be divided. Once that had happened, it was also incumbent upon the interim government, of which Jawaharlal Nehru was the Prime Minister, to manage the transition well. All I can say is that this transition was managed in the most haphazard, in the most incompetent manner possible. The only silver lining was Sardar Patel, who had managed as Home Minister to get all the princely states to sign on the dotted line by Sam, Dam, Dand, Bhed, as they call it, using every stratagem, reconciliation, subversion, threats, allurements, using every arrow in his quiver. He managed to get almost everyone on the line, except 3 or 4 states. The only states that had not signed on the dotted line and had not accepted the instrument of accession on 15th July 1947 were Jammu and Kashmir, Junagadh, Hyderabad, and Bhopal. These were the only 4 states left. Of course, Jodhpur and Travancore were late entrants. They came almost on the eve of the independence, only after their misgivings had been met. But then these 4 were the intransigent ones. And what was common to them? All 4 of them either had Muslim rulers or had Muslim majority. So the Muslim factor was common to all of them, but then he mismanaged it so magnificently that I think a greater show of incompetence is probably not seen in Indian history, maybe not probably even in the world history. And that happened because he was the beneficiary of what was a unilateral transfer of power. Mahatma Gandhi himself said, and I quoted him in a tweet today. I think if that tweet can be shown by the desk, it would be good. That he admitted that he had actually nothing to do. The Congress had nothing to do with the independence. He said that it is the history, it is the flow of history, and it is the circumstances which have got us this independence. There is nothing that we have done in it. That was the honesty with which Mahatma Gandhi actually admitted that they had really no part to play in independence. The last major movement they had done was 1942, which collapsed within a week. And after 1942, you cannot expect Britain to be so heavily influenced by that 1942 agitation that they agreed to transfer power to you in 1947. Remember, the original date, the original deadline that they had set was 1948, June 1948. And it was advanced by Mountbatten because Jawaharlal Nehru was in too much of a hurry. The reason that the date was advanced was because Jawaharlal Nehru was in too much of a hurry. And because he was too much of a hurry, the date was advanced by almost 1 year. And that resulted in such terrible bloodshed, and mostly though on both sides, but it was started by the Muslims in Western Pakistan. And in retaliation, the Sikhs, particularly in Punjab, also gave it back. This is the tweet that I was talking about. This is a tweet that says, can we have it zoomed in? I see it as clearly as I see my finger. British are leaving, not because of any strength on our part, but because of... Sorry, the tweet is gone. Something has happened. Let me read it again. I see it as clearly as I see my finger. British are leaving not because of any strength on our part, but because of historical conditions and for many other reasons. This is Mahatma Gandhi in 1947, actually. And why he was saying so? Because he was very clear in his mind at that time. You see, Mahatma Gandhi, one thing you can always say that he was not very consistent. He would say one thing in one Prarthana Sabha and next day he would change himself and say something else. So in his moments of candor, he was prone to speaking the unvarnished truth. And this is the unvarnished truth that came out on that day. And this was because the only reason that the British hastened this transfer of power was that they were in no position to hold on to India. The mutiny had taken place. They were no longer confident of having their hold on the armed forces. The naval mutiny had taken place. The armed forces were restless. There were a lot of demobilized troops all over India. And those demobilized troops had a lot of arms with them. And if this movement had carried on for a long time, they would have had great difficulty. In any case, they would have had to leave. Because of the Second World War, post-Second World War scenario, they were in no position to hold on. So they had to leave. But then they hastened it because they thought that if they stayed much longer, then they would create complications for themselves. And they also hastened to leave because Jawaharlal Nehru promised them that, okay, we would be able to take care of everything. You just leave. You just leave it to our fate. You please leave. I am in hurry to be Prime Minister. I am in such a great unseemly hurry to be Prime Minister that you must leave. And even after they left, what did he do? He requested the Governor General to stay as Governor General. Mountbatten stayed as Governor General. They divided India. They did not protect Hindus. They started protecting. Instead, what they started doing was that the number 2 point that I come to, they started practicing secularism. So this general incompetence combined with this secular attitude, so-called secular attitude, this secular in India right from the day of Alim Nehru. I called him Alim Nehru yesterday in my Hindi podcast. So right from the day of Alim Nehru has meant only one thing, and that is anti-Hindu. That is, being Hindu is communal, and being steadfast to your beliefs, even as a Muslim or a Christian, is being secular. And that definition is actually continued to this day Even this present government is not fully able to change it. From time to time, it has to kind of display its secular credentials for consumption of the so-called secular liberal press, the so-called secular liberal academia, and the so-called secular liberal politics. That is the misfortune of this country, and that misfortune started from the day that Congress decided that it had to play the Muslim card, right from the day of the Khilafat movement. Anyway, so this secularism combined with the general incompetence that he displayed in handling the partition, that created so much of havoc that on any conservative estimate, at least I think anything between 1 million to 3 million people got killed, and between 10 million to 15 million had to be displaced. And this happened after the Congress had accepted partition, hoping that they would be able to avoid bloodshed. Can there be greater lack of foresight? Can there be greater incompetence? The fact is that Jawaharlal Nehru did not have the stomach to be an effective ruler, and after the direct action day and after the series of riots that were let loose by the Muslim League and their formation of what is called the Muslim League National Guards, these days also you might have seen that PFI is preparing some kind of a militia. So that time there was a full-fledged militia called Muslim League National Guards. So wherever they're in majority, they let loose such a reign of terror that whatever you have seen in independent India, you cannot even imagine. The closest to that would be the cleansing of the Kashmiri Pandits from the Kashmir Valley. So that was the kind of genocide that took place in Western Pakistan at that time. So this secularism combined, and then the people who came, then the Gandhi-Nehru combination, when they took shelter in abandoned houses of Muslims who had left for Pakistan and mosques, Mahatma Gandhi went on a fast, saying that they must be vacated. And the people, the destitutes who had come, suffering bloodshed, suffering ravages, suffering terrible depredations and terrible brutalities, they were thrown out in that freezing winter of Delhi in December. Can you imagine? So that was the secularism that was practiced. And Nehru was happy. He had absolutely no compunction complying with that request. He just let it be. It was only Sardar Patel who would from time to time make some kind of a stand. But then the power of Mahatma was such, and especially his blackmailing tactics and going on a fast and all that. And that secularism also resulted in the 55 crores being released to Pakistan for fighting the war against India. That is also an extension of this secular politics. Then the extension of the secular politics was again when the question of reclaiming our places of worship arose. And that time again secularism came in the way. Even Somnath temple got built only because Sardar Patel put his foot down. And everybody knows that, of course, Sardar Patel passed away, and when finally the Somnath temple was built and it was to be inaugurated, Nehru refused to go. That was the level of his secularism. And later on, of course, he only changed the Hindu law. And when it came to Muslims, all the Leaguees, all the Muslim League politicians who had not gone to Pakistan, they quietly made their way into Congress, and the omnipotent Jawaharlal Nehru just closed his eyes and just allowed them in. That is because he wanted to consolidate his political base. He had become very unpopular, and in 1952, had there been a powerful entity and had there been what is called absolutely free and fair elections, then Congress would have suffered quite badly. So he needed this kind of a base, and so he merely allowed all Muslim League politicians to get into Congress. Not many people know that Maulana Abul Kalam Azad actually lost the 1952 elections in Rampur. And that time the way elections used to take place was also very strange. That they did not used to have one box. If you've seen the elections that used to take place through ballot boxes, then you have a ballot paper on which all the candidates' symbols are marked, and then you are supposed to stamp that symbol. At that time, there used to be no stamp. There used to be separate boxes. There used to be only 2 or 3 candidates at most. So there used to be separate boxes, those 2, 3 candidates, and you were supposed to take a ballot, sign on in the register that you've taken the ballot, and then all you needed to do was to take that ballot and put it in a ballot box of your choice. So you didn't have to stamp it at that time. 1946 elections also, 1945-46 elections, 36 elections, they had also taken place in the same manner. So the Rampur election was actually lost by Maulana Azad. And it was at that time that the Lord Nehru, Alim Nehru, he blew his fuse and told Govind Vallabh Pant, who was the chief minister of United Provinces, that if Maulana lost, then he would lose his job. And then things happened. And finally, Maulana Azad was declared elected. Next time he did not go there. And in 57, he ran away to the safety of Mebat again. So that is how the secularism went. This is a short video, so I cannot take you into all other deeper recesses. Suffice to say that you still see the after effect even till date. I have only given you a few instances. You can add many more from your side. Again, you can put it in the comments. Then the point number 3 was the mismanagement of the entire Jammu and Kashmir affair. Let me be very brief here, because the details of this are all given in that book that is coming, Unbreaking India, my book that is coming. So J&K, it is said, this canard is spread that the Maharaja was totally unwilling. Maharaja was not totally unwilling. Of course, he knew how this situation was going to shape up. So right in February, March, he had been demanding that Meher Chand Mahajan, who was then the Chief Justice of Lahore High Court, may be given to him as Prime Minister. But the interim government simply did not move. Every time Sardar Patel impressed upon Nehru to urgently heed to the request of Maharaja of Jammu and Kashmir, he would simply shrug his shoulders and not given to that request. Because of that, Ramchandra Kak continued, and Ramchandra Kak was very apprehensive of Sheikh Abdullah, and therefore he was allied with Jinnah. And that created so much of complications that it was only later that Meher Chand Mahajan was given to them only a few days before this accession took place. And accession also took place in circumstances that were beyond the control of everybody. And that also happened because of the death ring of Jawaharlal Nehru. Because Jawaharlal Nehru first wanted a guarantee that his friend Sheikh Abdullah would become the all-in-all of Jammu and Kashmir, only on the basis of communal principle. This so-called secularism that I am talking about, that had its full play in Jammu and Kashmir. Because in Jammu and Kashmir, he said that it is a Muslim majority province and Sheikh Abdullah must become the all-in-all. And completely against the spirit of the accession and the merger of the provinces, he handled Jammu and Kashmir. And finally, when the attack took place, the fraudulent attack of Pakistan in the name of what is called the tribal attack took place, then Maharaja signed the accession, and then another canard was spread that the Maharaja signed the accession that was of a different type. Let me tell you this categorically, and I have cited this in my book, and I have given the instrument of accession also in that book in the appendix, that the instrument of accession that was found by the Maharaja Hari Singh of Jammu and Kashmir was exactly the same as was signed by the other 560 plus provinces. So then how this happened? And this happened that even after that instrument of accession, because the instrument of accession is not something that you can devise. Instrument of accession was part of the Government of India Act 1935. It was there in one of the schedules. I think it was Schedule 11 that it was there. And according to that, it was signed. After that, when it was sent back, then Mountbatten wrote something which has no value because he cannot go beyond the law. But that became sacrosanct for our Lord Nehru. So what Lord Nehru did, he acted as a stooge of the British on one side and as a stooge of the Soviet Union on the other side. So in the day, he would be a stooge to the British. In the night, he would be a stooge to the Soviet Union. That was his character all through his 17 years as Prime Minister and his 1.5 year and has about 1 year or so as interim Prime Minister. A total of 18 years. There's 18 wasted years. Then, when the war happened, this is not a place to discuss war. Again, I request you to go to my book, Unbreaking India. It is given in fair detail. When the war happened with Pakistan, then he gave informally the command of the armed forces to Sheikh Abdullah again. And Sheikh Abdullah was not interested in integrating the Mirpur Kotli area, because the Mirpur Kotli Muslims were not really Kashmiri Muslims, and they were called Mirpuri Muslims. And they had a separate entity called Muslim Conference, and they were not really loyal to Sheikh Abdullah. So what happened was that on 15th November, when Indian Army had liberated Uri, they wanted to go to Muzaffarnagar. They were stopped there and later on diverted to Punch. So Muzaffarabad, which was there for the taking, that was not taken because of the interference of Sheikh Abdullah. Can you imagine somebody giving command to a civilian leader like Sheikh Abdullah and not really performing his role? And that was all happening because the Kashmir was being handled by Jawaharlal Nehru directly. In fact, I think soon after the accession, he took direct command. He removed Jammu and Kashmir from the state ministry, which was under the Home Minister, and put it under himself directly, and made Gopal Iyengar as the OSD dealing with Jammu and Kashmir. So this is how J&K was being dealt. And then suddenly one day it occurred to him, he discussed with Mountbatten, did not discuss in the cabinet, and suddenly went to All India Radio and announced that he was going to the United Nations. This is the only instance when anybody has taken his internal dispute to the United Nations. And then we come to the next. We know what all happened after that. That again, I would request you for this. I may be repeating myself, but all those details are there in my book. So this is how he mishandled the J&K situation. Then next we come to Tibet. Now in Tibet, he did exactly the reverse. In Tibet, the United States was ready to help. He kept believing in China because he was a dyed-in-wool communist. He was greatly impressed by the way the Soviets and Chinese used to work, and Soviet Union and China was one in those times. So he was not going to move against China at all, even though United States had its troops ready, United States had its armaments ready, United States had its aircrafts ready to help. All they wanted Nehru to just give his signal. And they only wanted to airlift some troops from India and go to the help of Tibet. Now, not only he did not help Tibet, and not only he did allow China to gobble up Tibet without any resistance, he also refused and actually actively opposed a discussion of the Tibet issue in the United Nations. So you can see, on the one hand, he takes his own internal issue to the United Nations, and an external issue which was so crucial to the defense of India, the Tibet issue, he refuses to take to United Nations. So that was our great blunder boy, Alim Lord Nehru. Then what does he do? After that, we can discuss what happened in Hyderabad. Hyderabad was a very complicated issue. He was dithering on it. Sardar Patel, after what happened in Kashmir, was very clear that he could not delay Hyderabad much longer. There was also the question of Mahatma Gandhi, how Mahatma Gandhi would react to a situation where a police action would be taken in Hyderabad or the army action would be taken. In fact, it was army action. It is euphemistically called police action, the Operation Polo that took place in September 1948. So ultimately what happened was that when Nehru was away to foreign shores, The matter had been discussed before he left, that they had to take that action. The timing was not decided. But then the wise man that Sardar Patel was, he found this time very opportune when he had the charge as Deputy Prime Minister. He was officiating as Prime Minister when Nehru went on a long trip abroad. At that time, the air services were like that, and if you went abroad, then you had to spend 15, 16 days at a time. It's not like today that the Prime Minister can go to the United States directly without any stops anywhere and then come back directly. You can do a round trip of US within 3 days these days. But at that time, it was not possible. So he was out for almost a month, and that was the time that he utilized. Sardar Patel utilized to liberate Hyderabad. But even for that, when Chakravarti Rajgopalachari, who had become the Governor General after Mountbatten had left, Chakravarti Rajgopalachari informed Nehru. At that time, cables and telegrams used to be the standard mode of communication. When he informed Nehru, then Nehru told Chakravarti Rajgopalachari that please ask Sardar Patel to wait. And Sardar Patel, though the mission had not been accomplished, when Chakravarti Rajgopalachari actually rang him and told him that Nehru wants that this action be stopped till he comes back. And in his characteristic style, Sardar Patel told Chakravarti Rajgopalachari, the then Governor General, the army is already in Hyderabad. The army reached Hyderabad only a day later. He said the army is already in Hyderabad. So that's a fait accompli. I cannot do anything now. And that's how Hyderabad got liberated. If you had left it to Nehru, he was actually thinking of taking Hyderabad also to the UN. And it was only to the credit of Sardar Patel that because Mahatma Gandhi was no more, then he could forcefully put his foot down and refuse and insist that nothing of that sort could be done without taking the cabinet into confidence. And that is how Hyderabad is still there. Otherwise, Nizam had every plan, along with Jinnah, to make it into what is called South Pakistan. So that you do not have a South Pakistan today is not because of Nehru, but in spite of Nehru. So that is how Hyderabad panned out. Now, let's look at another issue, and that is the pact with Liaquat Ali, which is popularly called the Liaquat Nehru Act. Liaquat Nehru Pact. The Liaquat Nehru Pact happened because the Pakistanis started cleaning up East Pakistan of Hindus, and then Hindus started running from East Pakistan to India. If you read Jogendranath Mandal's full letter, which I have appended as an appendix in my book, Unbreaking India, then you will realize what kind of atrocities had been let loose on the Hindus in East Pakistan. And most of the Hindus there were Dalits, the Nam Shudras and the Rajbongshis. These were the two major communities that had got left there, and they were all landed caste there. The Bengal partition had become possible only because of the cooperation of what is called the Dalit Federation under Jogendranath Mandal. And that same Jogendranath Mandal was not only totally betrayed, but the similar kind of atrocities were let loose against the Hindus in Bangladesh that had been done in West Pakistan in 1947 itself. And that started in 1949, and that continued. The Shama Prasad Mukherjee and other Bengali leaders took it up, and then they insisted that because they were absolutely sure, after having watched what happened in West Pakistan, they were absolutely sure that something similar would happen in East Pakistan also. So they said that with nothing doing, we want an enclave for Hindus. We have about 20% Hindus there, so we want 20% of East Pakistan for Hindus, and we want a complete population exchange. But instead of doing that, what he did was that he entered into a pact, believing those same people who had cleaned out all the minorities, all the Hindu Sikh minorities from Punjab, and to a good extent also from Sindh later on, because Sindh happened later. In Sindh, the riots started only after the Mujahirs and displaced persons from India reached Karachi. That happened 6 months later, in about January, February 1948. And it happened in East Pakistan 1949. From that experience, Shama Prasad Mukherjee was very clear that the same fate is going to befall the Hindus of Bangladesh. So they insisted on forming a separate enclave. But that was not to be. Instead, what he did was that he entered into a pact with Liaquat Ali Khan, which stipulated that both sides would take care of their minorities, as if Pakistan had ever taken care of their minorities. They had done everything to clean them up in West Pakistan. So only a naive person, an incompetent person, an inept person like Alim Lord Nehru could be expected to believe Pakistan. And sure enough, that happened. And Shama Prasad Mukherjee actually resigned on that point. He left the Nehru cabinet only on that point. And sure enough, we can see what happened today. Even after 1971, Mrs. Indira Gandhi also did not act. And not only that, Lord Nehru also allowed, under the secularism, there are also two things which I mentioned, I forgot to mention, was that he got included the term propagation of religion under Article 25, the freedom to conscience of religion. When we know that it's only the Islam and Christianity that do propagation or proselytization. So gave them a free pass to proselytization. And then he had a friend called Warrior Elvin, whom he protected in the Northeast till he converted most of the Northeast to Christianity. So that's another great contribution of Lord Nehru. So sometimes Alim Nehru, sometimes Lord Nehru, and sometimes Alim Lord Nehru. Then the failure of Liaquat Nehru Pact has reverberated till today. In 1971, Indira Gandhi also failed to secure that same promise. She was the person who carved out Bangladesh, and she could not get that new fledgling little state to guarantee rights to Hindus, because secularism came in the way. If you did anything to favor the Hindus or to protect the Hindus, then you would not be secular under the definition that is current in India even today. And so even in 1971, they could not be secured. Even today, they are not secure. So this is what the general contribution of Alim Lord Nehru was to the entire situation during the partition days. Then during the partition days, roughly I take it from 1947 to 1950 till the promulgation of the Indian Republic. So in the next round, I will be talking about what he did after he became Prime Minister of the Republic. So he has had 3 innings. First as the interim Prime Minister, then as Prime Minister of the Indian Dominion under the British actually, and then Prime Minister of the Indian Republic. So what he did as Prime Minister, the blunders that he committed as Prime Minister of Indian Republic would be in part 3. I have some questions, I am told, so let me take those questions. There is one question, so I'll answer that question. Sir, in my views, Nawab Nehru was Mahamurkh. Jai Hind. So that's only an observation. So I say Jai Hind. Shanta Raut's scholarly talks do little to awaken common Indian. I try to speak, but they sunk in secularism are not ready. Your thoughts on a way to get to them effectively. Madam, keep at it. You have to be persistent. Perseverance and persistence. That is the name of the game. Nothing can happen without building a narrative. And building a narrative takes a lot of patience, perseverance, and persistence. That is what we are trying to do, and that is what I would urge you to do. Please persevere. Please be patient. Please be persistent. So that's it. That brings us to the end of this show. Once again, I request you to like, subscribe, share, and press the bell icon and shower us with your contribution. I believe there is one more question that has just come, and let me deal with that too. How many terms will BJP need to clean trash created by Congress since independence time? Task seems to be taking forever. Well, I think it's just about 6 years. And already in the second term, within the first year, the tasks which have been accomplished, at least many of them I had not even hoped that I would see in my lifetime. So there's still a lot of time. Shivani, no, that was the previous one. Okay, time travel. Can we term his life as blunder, plunder, and surrender? I am not sure about plunder, but blunder and surrender, yes. 100%. Blunder and surrender, definitely. Completely agree with blunder and surrender. So, blunder boy, surrender boy. You can say that. You can add that. That's a beautiful one. Blunder boy, surrender boy. And thank you, Mr. Parekh. And thank you, all of you, once again. And Jai Hind, Vande Mataram.
Press the bell icon on YouTube and